I'll quickly take you through attestation. Okay, so attestation is again something that we've already talked about over and over again. That there are certain so basically you have two kind of analytics capabilities within Saviynt. And by analytics, I mean running specific reports or campaigns. Okay, so both of these takes place through attestations. Now, once we go to attestations, we might have different options altogether. Okay, so what is the just hold on. Yeah. So the part of attestation that you see here is basically entitlement owner attestation or role owner attestation. What are the configurations that will be applicable to all attestation is what you can configure from here. So if there are some attestation configurations that you would like to get applied to all the attestation of all the campaigns that you have, or when you run a campaign or create a new campaign, what are the options that you see there, right? That is something that you can see that what are let's say as a entitlement owner, if an attestation or a campaign is started, what can I do here, right? Whether do I want to show or hide the decommission option, whether I want to show or hide the nominate others option, whether I want to hide the reject button, right? Or show or I want to show or does not belong to me button. So what basically happens is, let's consider a scenario that there is a campaign that we run every quarter to make sure that the users who are reporting to a manager 3 months back are still reporting to the same manager, right? So what the manager, what we will do is we will go and we will configure a new attestation. Okay, so I'll create a attestation from here. Reporting manager campaign. It's a new campaign I'm creating. Okay, so what do I want to identify? Who are the entitlement owner or who is the role owner? So similarly, yeah. So let's take this example. I think that would create a better differentiation between an analytics and a campaign. So let's say I'm doing a role owner campaign where I want to know that if these roles belongs to a certain a person or not, right? If they are the owner, if they are the highest let's say authority to take call on these roles or not, right? Or has the owner changed? So if I want to do that, I can choose a type of let's say type of attestation, right? And from there, I can mention the start date and the end date. This is one of the key difference between a campaign and an attestation. An analytics and a campaign. Okay. So what is the key difference? Basically, when we are running a normal analytics query, we can run it daily, right? We can fetch reports ad hocly whenever we want. But campaigns or attestations run from one time to the other. It has an end date and a start date. Okay, how does that help? Because we were still now talking about that it will be quarterly, right? If it's really quarterly, that means that let's say if I'm providing May 8th as today date, right? I can mention that let's say after 3 weeks, the same day, the attestation, the campaign will get completed, right? And then what is the security systems that would be taken into consideration? So see, roles within Saviynt also relates to the target application roles that we have reconciled into Saviynt. When you have different systems that Saviynt is connected to, you will reconcile information. So let me actually correct this diagram, because we don't only provision information, we also reconcile information. That is, we refetch the information from the target application to Saviynt, right? That we would like to, going forward, we would like to manage all these users and their accounts from Saviynt itself, right? So it is more about getting to a state where we have the most updated information from both the HR system and the target application system, from HR about the user identity and from the target about user accounts. So that going forward, now I don't want to log into GCP to update a user's last name, right? I would like to, going forward, do it from my Saviynt instance itself. And that is why I would like to have the most updated information from both the HR source and the target source, get them in sync, so that now going forward, let's say even if I want to automate the entire process, where if the last name of the user is updated from let's say an Active Directory or from an HR source, that information flows into Saviynt. And because now my user identity is in sync with all the target application accounts, right, of the user, the last name will get updated in GCP as well as in Salesforce, as well as in Office 365, as well as in Yammer and Box, right? So that is exactly the same case with entitlements as well. When you have roles or any kind of entitlement on the target application, you would like to reconcile this into Saviynt so that you have the exact status of the user which is present inside GCP, right? So now going forward, you won't log in into GCP and update your last name, or the admin won't do it for you. Rather, as the Saviynt administrator can either do it manually, or if we have configured this automatically, this would be taken care by the user update, right? So that is the reason we would like this to be in the most updated state, and we would like the user and the accounts to be synced together, so that from one point I can update all information and I can manage everything about the user without having to go into the target application. What I was mentioning here was that we have an attestation that we are trying to create. We are saying that I want to know if all the roles still the roles still have the same owners, the owners that were present 3 months back, right? So I'm running a campaign for that. So what would be the end result of this campaign? All the role owners will receive an email notification or will receive a notification within Saviynt asking them whether they are still the owners of this role, right? Because that is how it has been marked in the Saviynt system. So if it is not the case, if someone is moving out or someone has moved to a different designation, right, and still they are the role owner for a role that they no longer take care of, so they can basically respond to that saying that, okay, I do not own this role now, something like that, right? So we have the security system. Why do we need to choose a security system? Because we want to execute this campaign only for certain systems. So not saying that we cannot run it for all the systems, let's say all the applications that we have. If you want to run it for a subset of applications, you can do that as well. Or otherwise, you can just mention all systems, right? And then you have attestation based on. So we are saying that which is the primary key of roles that we will be using to identify that this is a separate role. So role keys is usually the right way of doing it, because role key is usually unique. It is like a primary key. Okay, but you can also use a custom query. Okay, a role query, which would in turn generate a list of roles, owners, information, which you can then use. And whether we want to show or hide SOD by users, segregation of duties by any of the users, I'll keep that aside for now. Okay, okay. So in case I have chosen a SQL query, you can see that I have the option of writing a specific, let's say any specific SQL query that I want, that gives me a list of role owners. Okay. So here, if you can see, the one example that has been given is that role owner dot role key. Okay. And then we have the ID is less than 10. Okay. And the role owner account key is not null. What do I mean by that is that if there is a role key whose ID is, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4 till 9, those would be part of this campaign, right? Or and the role owner account key. So basically, there should not be any role owner which doesn't have a role owner account key assigned to them. That is basically a unique key which identifies that this role belongs to this owner. Okay, so both of these should be there. In case I want to make it more advanced, I can start writing users query and accounts query to filter it down a bit more, right? And then basically I can click on either create now, or I can schedule this for future, right? That let's say, and usually this is how it works. Let's say for the entire year, you can, if you want, you can schedule it, right? That after 3 months, this is the campaign that will run. After 2 months, that is the campaign that will run. Or otherwise, if you are you are like a BAU team who are supporting the client, you can create it when they ask you to do so. Okay, but this is a key capability which allows us to run campaigns throughout the year for different functionalities, and that's how we can do it. Now, what I was trying to tell you was that, let's say if I decide to create it, okay, so let me create it now. I think this is a back option, but anyways, let's see if I can create it now. Right. I'll have to mention some roles. So basically, I think from the UI option, someone has disabled it, but let's, if I would have had the back button, see, rather than creating a new one, let's take an existing example because it seems like it is stuck. We have a lot of campaigns which are already in progress. Now, the option that I was trying to show you through the admin console was what can I see for a campaign? Let's say if a campaign gets assigned to a person, let's say this one, right? This is in progress. You can see that there are 4 options that you see here. One is summary, then you have other options as well. Moreover, ready to submit certification. Let's quickly have a look at this particular one. Like there is a campaign which is overdue on this user, right? And then I want to see whether I can certify on his behalf or not. So this is something that only an admin can do, but ideally you should not do this. Whomsoever the campaign is assigned to, ideally they should be the ones who should be taking the call on it. The reason of showing you how to create an attestation and how to take care of it is that I wanted to show you what options does a user see within a certification, right? So let's say I am a user called as Jason, right? So holder Jason has a certification assigned to him, all right, and now I want to take a call. So what I can do is I can either tell that, okay, yes, it belongs to me, and then take a call on it. I can say that, okay, it does not belong to me. I can say that I want to decommission this, that going forward, this should not be used. And then I can also add someone to consult. So let's say I'm not sure whether this role belongs to me or not, or ideally whether this role should belong to me or not. Let I'm just continuing the same example that we took the last time, right? So if I want to consult someone else, I can click on consult and I can choose the name of the person whom I want to consult with, right? And then you can assign it to them, and they can take a call. Okay. And if I want to have a look at the history of when was it the last time that I provided a detail or provided an input on it, or what was the input, I can have a look at that. But the most important option here is to either belongs to me, or to say it does not belong to me, or the third one that is important is consult. Okay, because in business production environment, these are the three options that mostly you'll be providing. Okay, and where do we provide these options from, right? So we provide it from the admin console. So basically where we started from. So if I want to make sure that, okay, these are the options that a user is able to see, I'll go to admin, I'll go to attestation. So here is where I enable all those options from. Okay. So if you go to entitlement owner, you'll see that you have certain options, and then you can mention that, okay, these are the things that the person should be able to see, and these are the things they should not be able to see, right? So a reminder interval, after how much time should it be sent, right? Email template, which email template should be used once I execute this campaign, right? What type of email notification should the user receive, right? As a second reminder, this is the email template. What is the email notification that the user should receive as the first reminder to take an action, or when the campaign is created? All that information you can monitor, or rather you can provide from here. Okay, so that's how you control it. Now, from a logical perspective, it makes sense as well, because whatever option is used for administering the entire Saviynt instance, that is under the admin tab, right? So that's why you have attestations as well. The next and a very important topic is logger configurations. So I think this is something that most of us usually understand, right? That we do have logging capabilities. So be it any IDM tool or even otherwise, you will have a lot of logging capabilities to understand what are the errors, what are the problems that are there within the system, right? So we in Saviynt, you have basically two type of logs. I mean, not exactly two, you have more as well, but usually two or three type of logs is what is usually used. One is called as debug logs, one is called as error logs, and the third is called as custom logs. Okay. So if you want to change the logging level, you can do that from here, right? So if you want to only make sure that you have minimum amount of logs, you can make it fatal. If you want some more detail, you can do error. Then you can include warnings as well. You can include info, and then usually clients should be using debug. Okay. So the reason behind that is whenever you want to make sure that if there is an error, you are able to get sufficient amount of logs to understand where the error lies. You can use the debug version. If you want to even make it more final, you can make it trace. Trace log, obviously, as the name suggests, allows you to see every single operation that Saviynt is doing at the backend, and where it is getting stuck. So that is what you can see, right? So let's have a look at service loggers as well. For service loggers, whatever the level of logging you want, as a domain class logger and Grails logger. So basically, this is something that usually you guys won't touch upon. Okay, even if you want to increase the logging level, you will ask the Saviynt guys to do it. Okay, because you are never sure at the backend how does it translate, and if there is an existing process within Saviynt which might get affected, right? So it's better to ask them that, okay, we have a problem in place and we would like to change the logging level. Then we have a option called as UI branding. Uh, Nothing too fancy about it. Usually, people would like to just rather clients would like to look at their logos, right? Because that is their favorite instance. So at the login screen, if you want to change an image, you can use it from here, right? You can provide any of the images that relates or amounts to your client's logo. You can use that, and if you want to the same to appear on the application screen, you can do that. If you want to change the look and feel of the sidebar or the ARS styles in itself, you can use these. Okay, that what are the ARS style and what is the color, right? If you want to make any changes to that, you can make it from here. Usually, most of the clients would be satisfied if you just had a login screen rather than saying just save it, you put a logo there. right? So that is something which is more than mostly clients are happy with. And for that, you'll just change the login screen and you'll select an image, and that would be sufficient. In case you want to do any kind of adjustment in terms of how it looks, you can do it from topography and background and borders. I'm not really sure if you can change the pixel size or make it say a more high quality one through Saviynt. But in case that's there, you can ask the Saviynt guys, right? So the professional services guy would help you on that. Then you have something called as dashboard. I think it is something which many of us would already know about, right? That a dashboard is something which gives you a visual representation of whatever is happening within your system. So if you want to see how many users have logged in into my Saviynt environment, how many of them are having, let's say, login related issues and stuff like that, you can mention it. You can create those dashboards here. Again, dashboard is not something which is very frequently used, at least for what I've seen. In original implementation, Saviynt guys would have already done it. So because that only gives you a very high level perspective, and the high level perspective is only required by a very subset of users, mostly who are working at a leadership level, right? So only someone of them, if they want to have a look at how my identity and access management suite is, they might log in at some time and have a look. But regularly, on regular basis, usually no one will have a look at the dashboard. But you can configure it. Okay, not saying that you cannot configure it. So okay. So basically, this is a document which specifically talks about what kind of dashboards that you can develop and what are they used for, right? So we'll quickly have a look on what kind of dashboards are supported, right? So we were already here, and that's what we were discussing. That within admin you have the configuration section, and within configuration you have dashboard. You have a list of dashboards which are present out of the box, which you can use, right? So in case you want to use a tile, a pie chart, a donut chart, so those UI options are present here, right? Then you have a dashboard query, which basically specifies what kind of results do you want to see and in form of UI, right? UI pie charts or let's say any other kind of UI, let's say donut chart or something like that. So that is the query that you can mention, and then you can define chart properties as well. That let's say what is the distribution of each filter that you would like to have a look at. And so basically, that's about it. So this is ultimately this is how it will usually look like. Okay, so for our chart properties, we have defined that we have a chart type, which is basically mentioning icon warnings, right? And then what is the category? We have defined it as RDS, because again, that's the colors. Then we have whatever we have tried to make it, whether we want it to be clickable or not, we can mention that. What is the class name? What is the name of the dashboard that we are providing? Right? What is the category and what are the violations? So our violation display name is violation count. That's what we are trying to identify from here. So again, you have a lot of dashboard queries which are present in case you want to review it, right? But basically, more or less, the point is if you want to, so whenever you are running reports, usually you run reports using SQL query, and the result would be in form of a Excel. But if you wanted to see it through a UI, let's say in a more UI friendly manner, you can try to run dashboard queries and see how it turns out to be, right? But again, it is not something which will very frequently use. Okay, so you can just maybe do a high level reading to get an understanding of how do we configure this. Though there is nothing fancy about it, the only thing which it is really dependent upon is the dashboard query itself, right? So you can define the dashboard query. You can mention what kind of pie chart, or let's say what kind of dashboard you want to have a look at. What are the color combinations? What are the names, right? And then where are we getting the details in the sense of the data from? So let's say select all the users who have more than 3 password resets, right? So where last password count is more than 3, something like that. So you can have those dashboard queries. I won't go in detail here because, to be frank, it is not of much use. But in case you guys have any specific queries, we'll definitely discuss this in the next session. Okay. Now we have something really important called as configuration files. Now, what are configuration files? Basically, for Saviynt to run, there are some backbone capabilities or files which are used, right? Which obviously are called as configuration files. This is authentication config.groovy, and these are external configuration dot properties. Now, to be frank, you guys will be rarely using these files or even touching upon these files, because this is something which are the core capabilities, let's say core files of Saviynt, which it requires to execute different operations. But as the name suggests, the authentication config.groovy basically talks about that when you are logging into Saviynt or doing an authentication, which database are you authenticating against, right? Or what kind of authentication mechanisms are you using? all those details would be mentioned here. So let's see if I can quickly update it, right? So here you can see that you have the entire details here, right? We have mentioned that we have a SAML query, which basically does the authentication for us. What is the logout URL? The logout URL is SAML ECM, which is nothing but Enterprise Identity Cloud, our Saviynt instance, right? And then we are saying that it will be a SAML request, which will be to log out, and log out from local. The answer is true, right? So these are the endpoint details that I have provided. Now, what is the identity provider? Identity provider for us is the default identity provider, which is this. So all the details, right, here have been mentioned here related to my specific Saviynt instance. And that is the reason I was telling you that do not touch upon this, because these are the details where you are doing all the identity management in the sense of identity providing, configuring your IDP. So when you provide your username and password, against which database does it get let's authenticated against? You are mentioning all that information here. So basically refrain from touching upon that. But if you want any reference, let's say for any debugging perspective, right? Or if you want to know, let's say which database I'm connecting to, which port are we listening to, right? Or which is the organizational unit that we are doing a group-based search on. You can provide or you can refer this file for doing all that stuff. But again, as I mentioned multiple times, I do not advise you to touch upon this much. Okay. Similarly, you have another file called as external configuration.properties. So whenever you are touching upon or you are talking to a different application, whatever the details are needed to talk to those applications, we are mentioning them here. Okay, so you can see that you see Splunk, you see Okta with OIM. For all these applications, you can see that because we are getting in touch with an external application from Saviynt, you have an application or you have a file called as external configuration.properties, right? So one of the important, not important, but one of the very frequent use cases is that once you log out of Saviynt and you want to log in, at times it shows you an error message, right? So if there is an error message that you see, you can ask the Saviynt guys to have a look at authentication config.groovy to see if there is something wrong that we can see there, right? Why do I say so? Because usually I've seen that it is either between these two files that they make a very small tweak so that error stops coming, right? Otherwise, the redirection will ask you to click on OK, and then you'll see the Saviynt screen. But I think they have fixed this in the latest versions. So anyways, you guys won't see it, right? Now we have IDP configurations. What is an IDP? You guys already know about it. Whenever we've been talking about Saviynt, right, in and out, but we also did talk about that we have a database which is basically a Saviynt database, right? So when we are saying that it is a Saviynt database, we are saying that whenever someone tries to log in into Saviynt, their username and they need to provide username and password, and their username and password basically gets authenticated or gets checked against this database. Okay, so that is the database which is called as an identity provider for Saviynt. Okay, so what is the identity provider? The configurations are mentioned within the idp.xml. What is the key store? So whenever you want to interact with any HTTPS client, you need to import their key, right? And basically, which is a certificate. So whenever you are interacting with any such client, if you want to use the key store, you know that this is your key store. Again, usually you guys won't be touching on it. Okay, don't try to play around with this. This could result in a fallout. Okay, and then you have a service provider key store, which is again a certificate, but from the applications access, which is Saviynt's perspective. And then you have service provider XML. So basically, what is a service provider and what is an identity provider? Some of you might already know it, but still I'll quickly cover on it because this will be useful not only from Saviynt but from an overall identity management perspective. Okay, so basically, whenever you are trying to log into a application, so let's take an example of Google. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to access a new application, which is a Chrome, let's say Chrome's add-on. Okay, so this add-on requires me to provide my identity. This is a Chrome add-on. Okay, when I'm trying to add this Chrome add-on to my let's say Google Chrome, it is asking me for verifying my credentials. So I can either provide Google credentials or Facebook credentials or any of these identity providers credentials. So let's say I choose Google and then I choose my email ID. What will happen in the background? In the background, my credentials it will ask me to provide my Google username and password. So let's say the Gmail username and password that I have, it will ask me for that. Once I provide those details, these details would be sent out to Google's database. which will work as an identity provider. Okay, because it stores the username and password for all the Google accounts. Okay, so my account would also be tested there, whether the username and password that I have provided are correct or not. In case they are, it will send a success message to the add-on, right? To the or let's say to the add-on or to an application, and this success message will in turn give me the access. Okay, so here I did not create a separate set of credentials to access this. Rather, I used my existing credentials to access a new application. And how did that happen? That happened because I had something called as an identity provider configured. And what does this become? The add-on, it became the service provider because this is the service that I'm trying to use. Is it clear? This kind of use cases would be specifically used in terms of federation when you are trying to I'll talk about federation later, but what basically federation means is that you usually do not need to have a client's username and password to log into their services. If your database are federated, you can use your company's username and password and use some other company's let's say resources as well. Okay, so that is what is called as federation. So let's talk about SAV roles. Okay, and this is slightly interesting. Okay, so we have talked about roles which gives us certain kind of access within an application. So if I let's say if I log in into Salesforce and I have an admin credential, I'll see all my company's information in terms of what are my customer leads, what kind of revenues are we looking at, what are our let's say how many calls are my customer representatives making each day, right? But if I log in as a consultant, I will only see content which is related to my work, right? So that is how I'm restricting access or restricting access to information by defining roles. Now the same thing happens within Saviynt as well. So within Saviynt, I told you in yesterday's session very initially as well that let's say when I click on the ARS tab, I see all these tabs, right? But all these tabs are not going to be visible to the end user because to the end user, they only want to manage their own accesses or let's say their colleagues accesses at most, right? I cannot allow them to request emergency access roles just like that. I cannot allow them to manage endpoints. I cannot allow them to manage entitlement types. This is something which the administrator will have to do, right? So I need to create a restriction over there. So what a user can see and what a user cannot see depends on what is their persona, what is their SAV role, which is Saviynt role. So Saviynt role basically defines whenever a user logs into Saviynt, what he or she can see. Okay, so that is what we define as Saviynt role. Now, in Saviynt role, you can see that we have already some of these Saviynt roles configured. We have one called as role admin, which basically, let's say, because I have a admin role, I can see everything, right? So it is for admin user. Now it is for now there is an end user role. So what the end user can see, let's try to see. Okay. So when I click on end user, I can see that that there are only certain aspects that the end user would be able to see, and not all of them. And what can they see is something that we can control from here. Okay. So whom can the request the access for whom based on SAV roles? So let's say if I want to send out a request, right, for someone, can I send it for someone else as well, or I can only send a request for myself? So I mentioned that I can raise it only for myself, right? Or if you want, so let's say there are scenarios where a manager would like to send out, so let's say a new person gets hired within the organization and their access needs to be raised for, right? So when we are raising a request, we can also make sure that a person can raise a request on their one level down hierarchy's behalf. Okay, so whomsoever is reporting to you directly, you can raise a request for them as well. So these are the options that you have, right? Or let's say anyone can raise a request for anyone. We can make it request for all. Or if they cannot request for anyone else but for themselves, then we can make it self, right? Or if they cannot raise a request at all, we can make it cannot request. So all such options are there. You need to again find out basically a permutation and combination which works for you based on the requirement that the client proposes, right? So can I allow them to change approval? So whomsoever has this particular SAV role, can I allow them to change their approvals, right? Are they allowed to request an update? So all these options are present, right? So you can check upon that. Also, let me quickly check. Yeah. So this is exactly the most important option. Uh, so see, Whatever you saw here are more of like a advanced configurations which may or may not be used. But what will be definitely used is what you see here, some excessive. Okay. So these are the actual submenus. Okay. So see, when I assign this role end user to someone, the user would be able to see the request form. They'll be able to see their own request history. They'll be able to see what are open requests, and let's say remove access, workflow management, right? And workflow management, remove access, and workflow management, multi-user upload preview. So they can, let's say, preview for multiple users. But this is all the user can do, right? Let's compare it to an admin user. That's what an admin user has access to. See, so the admin user have access to connections. He has or she has access to configuration, mail template, sub-menu, which is entitlement type, job control panel, request map, everything, right? So that is the difference that we have defined, that a role end user would be able to access relatively less things as compared to an admin, right? And if you want to create another type of user, let's say for auditors, right? So auditors comes into the organization only for a very limited point of time, limited time. So for them, we might want to create a separate, let's say, Saviynt role, so that we can restrict what they can access and what they cannot access, right? So that they can get their job done as well. But because they're external to the company, they should not be given access to anything extra, right? And that is what you can restrict. Now, how do you make sure that that you're able to understand that if I want to add policies, how do you do that, right? So you click on action, you click on add new access, and then you have to start searching for them. There is no easy way around it. Okay. You have to start searching for the related menus and submenus. So here you can see that within the menu admin, we have a submenu called as policy rule list. And then we have policy rule access, right? So you have to check mark this, right? And then you might also want to see whether is there anything else that you're missing upon, right? So you can search for the menu first, and from the menu, then you start reaching out the hierarchy to submenus to see what are the other related submenus which are related to policies are there, and then you can tick mark all of them, right? So it will be a humongous task, to be frank, because there are many combinations. Okay. Um, So right now we can see that we had only two options, okay, because we have listed out all the sub options which are present under admin, and under that we only see that there are two sub options for policy rule set and policy rule access. So that is why if I provide these two accesses to an end user, the end user would also be able to see the policy drop down from the admin, though they would not be able to see the job control panel, workflow, and other options. Okay, so that is how you control it. Now the control is not only at the access level, but you can also restrict things what you can see in a create request home option, right? So whenever I'm going at the home page, what I'm able to see, I'm able to see the existing access of my own existing accesses, my request history, my request enterprise roles. So these are basically nothing but ARS files. So on the ARS files, what are we seeing, right? And request approval. So this is for the end user. So whenever I assign this particular role to the end user, they'll be only able to see. Whereas if you look at us, we can have a look at manage endpoints, we can do manage organization and everything else, right? Similarly, we can also restrict what kind of dashboards can the end user see, what kind of analytics can the end user see, and then what kind of workflows do the user have access to, right? So obviously, as an end user, you will never give them access to these configuration type of parameters, because this is specifically restricted to administrators. But if you want to create a different role, which is more of a let's say custom role built, let's say only for people who are building dashboard for you, right? Then you can provide them access to only dashboard and take away all the other accesses, right? So I hope I would have been able to clear the point that what basically SEV role does, right? Now, another important aspect of looking at it is you can also create a combination of application roles and Saviynt roles. Okay. So what I mean by that is that you can mention that a person with SAV, a person with SAV roles um, can can see these things within Saviynt, but then you can also try to map it, or you can add another type of application role so that these kind of users can see these things within Saviynt. And when they log into their target application, these are the things that they get access to. Okay, so that is an advanced sort of a model, but there is a capability of doing that, right? Now comes the most important part of today's training. Okay, that is the job control panel. Now, whatever operation that you perform within Saviynt has to take place at a certain point in time, right? So either it could be scheduled when it runs according to the tenure, or it runs manually. Okay. But for either ways, whenever you want to perform an operation, you need to use a job for that. Okay. So if a job is scheduled according to time, we call it as a scheduled job. Otherwise, it is an ad hoc job. Okay. So let's talk about what kind of jobs do we have within Saviynt. That whenever you want to import this information from target application into Saviynt, right, you will be using an option or a job called as application data import. So that's the name of the job. So application data import could be single threaded or could be multi-threaded. Multi-threaded jobs are used when you have a whole lot of a large set of data which needs to be imported at the same time simultaneously. So let's say I want to import both the user and their group membership at the same time. In those use cases, I'll be using multi-threaded operation. But the best practice says that you should import them separately. You should import users separately and then their accesses or let's say group separately, right? So, but if there is a very huge data set, let's say 10 million users or 10 million entries at the same time, if you start importing it with a single threaded job, it will take days, if not weeks, right? So it is better that we use a multi-threaded import in those cases. Okay, so they've given a small description here as well. So if you want to trigger multiple triggers as for parallel imports, right? So that's what we're talking about. Now, what we will be most frequently using is application data import single threaded. You can create separate triggers. So basically, though you see it as a job, this is nothing but a trigger. Okay, so how does a trigger work? You basically, so let's have a look at this one. Okay, so what you can do is you can click on add new job. What is the name of the job? I'm saying test one. So I created a new trigger. So now if I go to application data import, I'll be able to see test one. And now I can click on actions and then I can click on edit trigger. So when I click on edit trigger, it asks me that for which system, for which security system do you want to create this? Do you want to create this trigger for? So I'm saying that I want to use it, let's say for Duo. Okay. What is the external connection? See, the external connection itself got populated. Why? Because if you remember, within the security system, we have already chosen a connection, right? That is why it got pre-populated. So basically, in at a logical level, we are saying that if you want to, when we want to do a reconciliation, let's say want to import data, which endpoint or which connection would we be using? We will be using this particular connection, right? So that's what we are trying to say here. Now we have what type of job is it? We are saying that it is a full import. Okay. If it could be an incremental import as well, provided that the target application supports it. What is the difference between full import and incremental import? Full import, as the name suggests, will import all the user related information or account related information of the users from target to Saviynt, right? But if you want to only import a subset of people who have got access, let's say within the last week, then you will do an incremental import, so that you don't have to import, let's say, all the 2000 users. You can maybe just import 20. That is basically the change in data set which has happened over the last week, right? So, but the target application needs to support it. Then we have what kind of import are we trying to do? Are we trying to import accounts or accesses, right? So basically, I think Aarti, you were asking that, right? Why do we have these separate connections? Now, we can have these separately. So for reconciling and provisioning, it was different, right? I explained it to you. But while reconciling as well, we can have different triggers to import accounts and to import accesses. Also to tell you, in dev environments or in test environments, we can use the same one. Right? It is only in production that we try to bifurcate it so that in case tomorrow there is a problem with group import, we do not struggle to find out whether it is accounts import which is giving a problem or group import in terms of access which is giving a problem. Right?
Okay.
That is why we keep it separate. So here I'll choose accounts and then we can click on next, right? And then I can choose when does it trigger, right? Whether I want to trigger it every minute, every hour, let's say in hourly basis, on daily basis, on weekly basis, or there is a separate cron expression that I would like to define. What is cron expression? Cron expression is basically a custom logic that you can write in common SQL query, right? So you can make it as custom as you would like. If you want to run it only specific days of the week, you can use that. Let's say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10:30 a.m. Okay. So you can mention something like that, and that will run on the side. Okay, and you can submit. Now, what if you want to run it at this point in time? So I created a new trigger and I want to execute it now, right? So you can click on start. It will again ask you for the same details. Why is that? Why is it asking you for the same details? Because as I told you, it is just a trigger. Okay, it is not an actual job. The job will be running in the background. So let me try to quickly mention the same thing that we are doing it for Active Directory, or we are doing a full import. And see, now you have an option for incremental import as well. Why is that? Because now I'm using Active Directory which supports incremental import, right? Duo do not support incremental import. So I'll tell you what basically is the difference and how does at the backside it works. But if I want to do a full import, I can choose that and then I can choose accounts and then I can click on submit. Okay. So let's see. So obviously it would not have run right now, but still let's see. What will happen is it might give us a success message, but there might be no users which will get imported, right? Because I'm not really sure if we have that configured. But what I would like to still to show you is that in case there is any job which is not running fine or which is erroring out, how to debug that, right? So we go to the job control panel, we see the job that we want to debug, we click on that. Once you click on that, it will show you a list of all the job runs that has happened in the past, right? So let's say even 5 or 2 minutes ago. So right now I see I just executed this one, application data import single threaded. For what? For Active Directory. At what time? At this, right? What was the file name? This was Active Directory import. What was the response? Whether it was successful or not? It was successful. But now I want to see some other details as well. Then I can click on that. And here, if you have any error message, mostly it will appear. Okay. So here, if in case you have any problems, you'll be able to see that here. And in case you want to see other related information, you will be able to see those as well here. Okay. So that is where you can look at from a UI level, but it is obviously always better to go to log and then have a look at the log. So how to look at logging, I'll tell you separately. Okay. But let's now click on this one. Okay, so if you see, it says that what was the job name, what was the job type, what was the account type, and what was the LDAP attribute imported. So these are the basically this is something which we provided uh, in our connections. Okay, so if you see, firstly, I already see a syntax error here because if you're using user account control as employee ID and common name after name, there should be no comma, right? Because this is the last attribute. So we'll correct that, but this is how basically a job runs. Okay, so this was specifically for importing user accounts or accesses. Okay,